Welcome to Topical Economics. If you haven't subscribed yet, then subscribe now for more valuable content that breaks down key economics concepts and past paper questions in a clear, understandable way. In today's video, we're tackling market failure, explaining the correct answers to multiple choice questions, and going through why the other options aren't quite right. Whether you're studying for exams or just looking to improve your economics skills, this video is designed to help you succeed. Let's get started. Starting with the first question. Which combination of terms describes a public good? Reference, 2022 February-March version 2. The correct answer for this question is option A. Public goods are non-excludable and non-rival. This means that people cannot be excluded from using the good, and one person's use of the good does not reduce its availability to others. Moving to question number 2. What is an example of a public good? A. Healthcare. B. Street lights. C. Unemployment benefits. D. Vaccinations. Reference, 2021 October-November version 3. The correct answer for this question is option B. Street lights. Street lights are a public good because they are non-excludable and non-rival. Non-excludable because once street lights are installed, no one can be excluded from using them. Everyone benefits from the light, whether they contribute to the cost or not. Non-rival, because one person using the light doesn't reduce its availability for others. Multiple people can benefit from the street lights simultaneously without diminishing the service. Analyzing the other options. Option A, healthcare. Healthcare is often excludable because people can be charged for services or excluded based on lack of insurance or ability to pay. Healthcare is also rival because resources, like hospital beds, doctor time, are limited, and one person's use reduces availability for others. Therefore, healthcare is a private good, not a public good. Next, option C, unemployment benefits. Unemployment benefits are excludable based on eligibility. Only those who qualify can receive them. Rival, while unemployment benefits are not traditionally rival, one person's receipt does not directly affect another's, they are not non-excludable. Public goods need to be non-excludable, so unemployment benefits do not qualify as a public good. Lastly, option D, vaccinations. About excludable, vaccinations are excludable because access can depend on factors like availability, cost, or location. About rival, while vaccinations are non-rival in the sense that one person getting vaccinated does not affect others' access, they are excludable and can be limited in supply, making them closer to a merit good or quasi-public good than a true public good. Moving to question number 3. Which combination of characteristics describes a public good? A. Excludable and non-rival in consumption. B. Excludable and rival in consumption. C. Non-excludable and non-rival in consumption. D. Non-excludable and rival in consumption. Reference, 2021 October-November version 2. The correct answer for this question is option C, non-excludable and non-rival in consumption. A public good is defined by two key characteristics. Non-excludable, no one can be prevented from using the good. And, non-rival, one person's use of the good does not reduce its availability for others. Public goods, such as national defense or street lights, are examples where everyone can use the good without diminishing its benefits to others, and no one can be excluded from using it. Analyzing the other options. Option A, excludable and non-rival in consumption, describes a club good, also known as a quasi-public good, like cable TV or a private park. While people can use it without reducing others' use, non-rival, access can be restricted, so it is excludable. Next, option B, excludable and rival in consumption, combination describes a private good, such as a sandwich or a car. These goods are excludable, you can prevent others from using them, and rival, one person's consumption reduces the amount available for others. Lastly, option D, non-excludable and rival in consumption, combination describes a common resource, such as fish in the ocean or a public pasture. These goods are non-excludable, no one can be easily excluded from using them, but they are rival because one person's consumption reduces the amount available for others. Moving to question number 4. To help reduce the price of oil, new supplies are needed. However, objectors oppose exploration of new sites because of environmental damage that it may cause. Why is this statement an example of the basic economic problem? A. Oil is a limited resource. B. Oil is expensive. C. The exploration involves demand and supply. D. There are external costs involved in production. Reference, 2021 October-November version 2. The correct answer for this question is option A. Oil is a limited resource. The basic economic problem arises because resources are limited, but human wants are infinite. This creates the fundamental issue of scarcity. In the context of this question, the oil resource is limited. There are finite supplies of oil on Earth. This scarcity drives the need for exploration of new oil sites to increase supply and lower the price. However, environmental concerns are raised because exploration might damage the environment, creating a trade-off between increasing supply to meet demand and the external costs, environmental damage. So, the key issue here is scarcity, the fact that oil is a limited resource, and the need to balance its supply with the trade-offs involved, e.g., environmental damage from exploration, is an example of the basic economic problem. Analyzing the other options. Option B, oil is expensive, does mention oil prices, but the focus is on resource scarcity, not just the price of oil. The basic economic problem is about allocating limited resources, like oil, not simply the fact that oil is expensive. While prices are a factor, the fundamental issue is scarcity. Next, option C. The exploration involves demand and supply. While supply and demand are involved in this situation, the core of the basic economic problem is scarcity. The dilemma is not about the mechanics of supply and demand, but rather about the limited availability of oil and how to balance the exploration of new sites with the potential environmental damage, which comes back to the issue of resource scarcity. Lastly, option D. There are external costs involved in production, is related to negative externalities, such as environmental damage, but it doesn't directly address the basic economic problem of scarcity. While external costs are a part of the decision-making process, the key issue in the question is that oil is a limited resource and how to allocate it in light of competing concerns. Moving to question number 5. When is production certain to harm society? A. When the private costs are greater than the private benefits. B. When the production results in externalities. C. When the social costs are greater than the private costs. D. When the social costs are greater than the social benefits. Reference, 2021 October-November version 1. The correct answer for this question is option D. When the social costs are greater than the social benefits. In economics, social costs refer to the total costs to society of producing a good or service, which includes both private costs, borne by the producer, and external costs, borne by third parties, such as environmental damage or public health effects. Social benefits, on the other hand, include both private benefits, gained by the producer or consumer, and external benefits, gained by others, like positive externalities from a public good. If the social costs of production exceed the social benefits, the result is a net harm to society. This implies that the total costs, including negative externalities, outweigh the total benefits of the production process, meaning that society as a whole would be worse off if the good were produced at the current level. This situation reflects market failure, where resources are being misallocated and society would benefit from reducing the production or finding more efficient ways to address the problem. For example, if a factory is producing goods but also causing significant pollution, a negative externality, the social costs, pollution, health impacts, etc., could be much greater than the social benefits, the factory's output. This results in harm to society because the harm caused by the pollution outweighs the benefits of the production process. Moving to question number 6. What is a definition of market failure? A market forces of demand and supply do not allocate resources efficiently. B. Not all consumers can afford to buy the goods they would like. C. Private benefits of consumption are greater than external benefits. D. Public goods are only provided by a government. Reference, 2021 May-June version 3. The correct answer for this question is option A. Market forces of demand and supply do not allocate resources efficiently. Market failure occurs when the market, operating on its own through the forces of demand and supply, fails to allocate resources efficiently. This means that the market does not produce the right quantity or quality of goods and services at the right prices, leading to inefficiencies that harm society. The resources may not be distributed in a way that maximizes total welfare, and as a result, socially optimal outcomes are not achieved. Market failure can occur for several reasons, including externalities, positive or negative, where costs or benefits are not reflected in the market price. Public goods, which are non-excludable and non-rival and are not adequately provided by the market. Monopoly power, where firms can restrict output and raise prices, leading to inefficiency. Information asymmetry, where one party in a transaction has more or better information than the other, leading to poor decisions. Thus, market failure is specifically about inefficiency in resource allocation, where the market doesn't lead to the best possible outcome for society. Analyzing the other options. Option B. Not all consumers can afford to buy the goods they would like, refers to issues of income inequality or affordability, but it does not define market failure. Even if consumers can't afford certain goods, this doesn't necessarily mean that market forces are inefficient. This is more about income distribution and purchasing power, which is not the same as market failure. Next, option C. Private benefits of consumption are greater than external benefits, describes a situation where private benefits, the benefits received by the individual consumer, exceed any external benefits, the benefits to society or third parties. While it may indicate some misalignment, it doesn't directly describe market failure. In fact, market failure typically occurs when external costs or external benefits are not reflected in the price, rather than just the private benefits. Lastly, option D. Public goods are only provided by a government, is related to public goods but does not define market failure. Public goods are non-excludable and non-rival, which often leads to market failure because the private sector has little incentive to provide them, since they can't easily exclude non-payers. However, the statement doesn't explain the inefficiency in resource allocation that is central to market failure, it just highlights a feature of public goods. Moving to question number 7. What is an example of an external benefit from an individual cycling, rather than driving, to work? A higher cost of building cycle lanes. B. Improved physical fitness to the individual from cycling. C. Lower cost of cycling compared with driving to work. D. Reduced congestion for other road users. Reference, 2021 May-June version 1. The correct answer for this question is option D. Reduced congestion for other road users. An external benefit, also called a positive externality, occurs when an individual's action benefits others who are not directly involved in the activity or transaction. In this case, when an individual chooses to cycle rather than drive to work. The individual benefits from a healthier lifestyle, but the external benefit is the reduced congestion that benefits other drivers and commuters. Fewer cars on the road lead to less traffic, making it easier and quicker for others to travel. This is a benefit to society that the person cycling does not directly receive but is experienced by others on the road. Thus, reduced congestion is an external benefit because it improves the well-being of others, even though it's the cyclist's decision to cycle. Analyzing the other options. Option A. Higher cost of building cycle lanes, refers to a cost, specifically the cost of building infrastructure, not a benefit. In fact, the construction of cycle lanes could be considered a cost to society, rather than an external benefit. The higher cost of infrastructure is a negative externality if the cycle lanes are funded by taxpayers and don't lead to sufficient benefits. Next, option B. Improved physical fitness to the individual from cycling, is a private benefit to the individual who chooses to cycle. It benefits the person who cycles but does not directly affect others, so it is not an external benefit. Lastly, option C. Lower cost of cycling compared with driving to work, refers to the private benefit that the cyclist receives in terms of cost savings, e.g., fuel, parking, but it is not an external benefit. External benefits arise from effects on others, not the individual making the decision. Moving to question number 8. Which problem will be reduced by a government subsidy to affirm? A. Absence of a public good. B. Abuse of monopoly power. C. Overconsumption of a demerit good. D. Underconsumption of a merit good. Reference, 2021 May-June version 2. The correct answer for this question is option D. Underconsumption of a merit good. A merit good is a good or service that has positive spillover effects for society, and it is often undervalued or underconsumed in a free market. This occurs because individuals may not fully appreciate the broader social benefits of consuming the good, such as health or education, or they may face barriers like high costs. A government subsidy is a financial support provided by the government to encourage the consumption or production of certain goods. By offering a subsidy to a firm producing a merit good, the government lowers the cost of production or the price for consumers, which makes it more affordable and encourages higher consumption. For example, a subsidy for vaccinations or education can lead to increased consumption of these beneficial goods, which is important for overall societal well-being. Subsidies are a common policy tool to correct market failures associated with underconsumption of merit goods. Analyzing the other options. Option A. Absence of a public good. A public good is a good that is non-excludable and non-rival, meaning that people cannot be excluded from using it, and one person's use does not reduce availability to others. Subsidies typically do not solve the problem of the absence of public goods. Public goods are often provided directly by the government, e.g., national defense, street lighting, rather than through subsidies to firms. Next, option B. Abuse of monopoly power. Monopoly power occurs when a firm has control over a large portion of the market and can set prices above the competitive level, harming consumers. A subsidy would not address this problem directly. In fact, subsidies could sometimes exacerbate the problem by making it easier for monopolists to sustain their power. To address monopoly power, antitrust laws or regulations would be more effective, not subsidies. Lastly, option C. Overconsumption of a demerit good. A demerit good is a good that is considered harmful or undesirable to society, such as cigarettes or alcohol. Governments often use taxes or regulations to discourage the consumption of demerit goods, not subsidies. Offering a subsidy would encourage more consumption of a demerit good, which is the opposite of what policymakers generally aim for. Moving to question number 9. Which characteristics of a product will cause market failure? A. Information about the product is known equally by consumers and producers. B. The consumption of the product has no external benefits. C. The product is non-rival and non-excludable. D. The production of the product has no external costs. Reference, 2021 February-March version 2. The correct answer for this question is option C. The product is non-rival and non-excludable. The characteristics described in option C refer to a public good. Public goods are non-rival and non-excludable, which often causes market failure because private markets struggle to provide these goods efficiently. Non-rival means that one person's use of the product does not reduce its availability to others, e.g., public goods like national defense or street lighting. Non-excludable means that it is difficult or impossible to exclude people from using the product, even if they don't pay for it, e.g., clean air, public parks. These characteristics lead to market failure because 1. Private firms are not incentivized to provide the goods since they can't charge people who benefit from it, leading to underproduction or no production at all. 2. There is often a problem of free riding, where individuals benefit from the good without paying for it, resulting in insufficient provision of the good. 3. Public goods often require government intervention for provision because the market fails to deliver them at the socially optimal level. Analyzing the other options. Option A. Information about the product is known equally by consumers and producers. If both consumers and producers have equal information, this is actually a feature of a well-functioning market, rather than something that causes market failure. In fact, imperfect information, where either consumers or producers have less information, is a common source of market failure because it leads to poor decision-making, such as adverse selection or moral hazard. But perfect information would reduce market failure, not cause it. Next, option B. The consumption of the product has no external benefits. If a product has no external benefits, it simply means it is a private good with no positive externalities. This does not inherently cause market failure. In fact, markets can often function efficiently for private goods, those with no externalities, since producers and consumers both bear the costs and benefits. Market failure usually arises when there are externalities, either positive or negative, but the absence of external benefits does not cause failure. Lastly, option D. The production of the product has no external costs. If production has no external costs, this suggests that there are no negative externalities, e.g., pollution, congestion. In this case, the market is not experiencing failure due to production-related externalities. A market failure due to externalities typically happens when the social costs of production, such as pollution, exceed the private costs, but if there are no external costs, this would not lead to market failure. Moving to question number 10. Why might a market economy fail to achieve the best use of scarce resources? A. Consumers may lack information about which good to buy. B. Demerit goods are underconsumed. C. Public goods are overconsumed. D. Most resources are owned by the government. Reference, 2020 October, November, version 2. The correct answer for this question is option A. Consumers may lack information about which good to buy. A market economy relies on consumers and producers making informed decisions to allocate resources efficiently. However, if consumers lack information about the goods and services they are purchasing, they cannot make optimal choices that lead to the best use of scarce resources. This situation is known as market failure due to imperfect information. When consumers don't have full or accurate information about a product's quality, price, or benefits, they might make decisions that are suboptimal, leading to inefficiency in resource allocation. For example, consumers might buy products that are not the best value or that do not fully meet their needs, resulting in a misallocation of resources. In some cases, asymmetric information, where one party has more information than the other, can exacerbate this problem, leading to issues like adverse selection, e.g., buying low-quality products without knowing it, or moral hazard, e.g., a lack of incentive to avoid wasteful consumption due to not knowing the long-term effects. Analyzing the other options. Option B. Demerit goods are underconsumed. Demerit goods are those that are considered harmful to individuals or society, e.g., cigarettes, alcohol. In a market economy, demerit goods are typically overconsumed because consumers often undervalue the negative externalities, like health costs or social harm. Governments might step in to regulate or tax demerit goods to reduce consumption, not encourage it. The issue here isn't underconsumption, but overconsumption of demerit goods, which can lead to inefficiency and harm to society. Next, option C. Public goods are overconsumed. Public goods are non-excludable and non-rival, meaning they are available to everyone, and one person's use doesn't reduce the availability to others, e.g., clean air, national defense. Public goods tend to be underconsumed, not overconsumed, because private markets have little incentive to provide them. Overconsumption of public goods is unlikely because of the free rider problem. People benefit from them without paying, leading to underproduction or no production in a market economy. Lastly, option D. Most resources are owned by the government. If most resources are owned by the government, this could lead to centralized planning rather than a market-based economy. This is actually a feature of command economies, not market economies. The problem in a market economy is typically related to how resources are allocated by private agents, not by government ownership. While government ownership can create inefficiency in certain cases, it's not the fundamental reason why a market economy might fail to achieve the best use of resources. Moving to question number 11. The government wants to reduce the consumption of cigarettes. Which policy would be most likely to do this? A. Increasing a subsidy on cigarettes. B. Increasing income tax. C. Increasing interest rates. D. Increasing the indirect tax on cigarettes. Reference, 2020 October, November, version 2. The correct answer for this question is option D. Increasing the indirect tax on cigarettes. To reduce the consumption of cigarettes, the government is likely to use a tax-based policy aimed at raising the price of cigarettes, which discourages consumption. Indirect taxes, such as excise taxes on cigarettes, increase the cost of the product, making it more expensive for consumers. As a result, higher prices typically lead to lower demand, especially for goods like cigarettes that have price-sensitive consumers. Cigarettes are a demerit good, a product that is harmful to health. By increasing the tax on cigarettes, the government can discourage consumption, reduce negative health outcomes, and generate tax revenue that can be used for public health campaigns or healthcare costs. This policy is effective because it directly targets the price mechanism to alter consumer behavior. Analyzing the other options. Option A. Increasing a subsidy on cigarettes. A subsidy would reduce the price of cigarettes, making them more affordable and likely increasing consumption, which goes against the goal of reducing cigarette use. Subsidies are typically used to encourage consumption, not reduce it. Next, option B. Increasing income tax might reduce disposable income, but it is not specifically targeted at reducing cigarette consumption. While it could indirectly discourage spending on non-essential goods, it's a broad-based policy that does not directly impact cigarette prices or consumption in the same way that an indirect tax on cigarettes does. Lastly, option C. Increasing interest rates is a monetary policy tool used to control inflation and regulate the economy. While higher interest rates could reduce consumer spending in general, they are not directly related to reducing cigarette consumption. People might still choose to buy cigarettes even with higher borrowing costs, making interest rates less effective for this specific goal. Moving to question number 12. What aspect of demerit goods means they are overproduced? A. Clear product information. B. High external costs. C. High product taxes. D. Low customer demand. Reference, 2020 May-June version 1. The correct answer for this question is option B. High external costs. Demerit goods are those goods that are considered harmful to individuals or society, such as cigarettes, alcohol, or junk food. They are typically overproduced in a market economy because the negative externalities, external costs, associated with their production and consumption are not fully reflected in the price of the goods. External costs refer to the costs that are imposed on third parties who are not directly involved in the transaction. For example, smoking not only harms the smoker but also causes healthcare costs, secondhand smoke exposure, and environmental damage, which society must bear. Overproduction occurs because producers and consumers are not accounting for these external costs, so they consume and produce more of the good than is socially optimal. The market price of the good does not include these external costs, leading to inefficiency and overconsumption. Therefore, the primary reason demerit goods are overproduced is the high external costs associated with them, which are not accounted for in the market. Analyzing the other options. Option A. Clear product information generally leads to more informed consumption choices. If anything, it would reduce overconsumption of demerit goods by alerting consumers to the negative effects of those goods. However, demerit goods are typically overproduced because of externalities, not because of a lack of clear information. Next, option C. High product taxes on demerit goods, like cigarettes or alcohol, are generally used to reduce consumption, not to encourage it. By increasing the price through taxes, governments aim to internalize some of the external costs and decrease demand. So, high product taxes would likely reduce rather than increase the overproduction of demerit goods. Lastly, option D. Low customer demand would reduce the consumption and production of a good, not lead to its overproduction. Demerit goods are overproduced when there is excessive consumption relative to their true social cost, often due to the absence of proper pricing that reflects the external costs. Moving to question number 13. Why are governments responsible for the defense of the country? A. It is impossible to charge a price for defense. B. It prevents individual citizens having access to weapons. C. Only governments can manufacture weapons. D. Providing defense is very expensive. Reference, 2020 May-June version 2. The correct answer for this question is option A. It is impossible to charge a price for defense. The government is responsible for the defense of the country because defense is a public good, which is characterized by two key features. Non-excludability, no one can be excluded from benefiting from national defense once it is provided. Even if individuals do not pay for defense, they still enjoy the benefits of security and protection. Non-rivalry, one person's enjoyment of national defense does not reduce its availability to others. A stronger defense does not mean that fewer people can benefit from it. Because of these characteristics, it would be impractical and inefficient for private firms to provide defense, as they would not be able to charge all citizens or prevent free riders, people who benefit from defense without paying. This creates a market failure, where the private sector cannot efficiently provide defense services. Therefore, the government steps in to provide this essential service to everyone, funded through taxes. Analyzing the other options. Option B. It prevents individual citizens from having access to weapons. While governments regulate weapons ownership, this is not the primary reason why they are responsible for defense. National defense is a matter of protecting the country from external threats, which involves organizing armed forces and military defense capabilities. Allowing citizens to own weapons individually is not a sufficient or practical solution to ensure national defense, as coordination and scale are required for effective protection. Next, option C. Only governments can manufacture weapons, is inaccurate. Private companies can and do manufacture weapons, particularly in the case of defense contractors. However, this does not mean that governments are only responsible for defense because they are the sole producers of weapons. The key issue is that national defense is a public good and involves broader coordination, strategy, and execution than private individuals or companies can handle. Lastly, option D. Providing defense is very expensive. While it is true that national defense can be expensive, this is not the defining reason why governments are responsible for it. Many essential services are costly, e.g., healthcare, infrastructure, but governments take on these responsibilities because of the need for equitable provision and coordination. The main reason for government responsibility in defense is the non-excludability and non-rivalry of the good, making it a classic public good that markets cannot efficiently provide. Moving to question number 14. What is a cause of market failure? A. Many firms. B. Monopoly. C. Profit maximization. D. Specialization. Reference, 2020 May-June version 2. The correct answer for this question is option B. Monopoly. A monopoly occurs when a single firm or a small number of firms dominate the market for a particular good or service, and they have the power to influence prices and restrict output. Monopolies lead to market failure because 1. Reduced competition. With limited or no competition, monopolies can produce less and charge higher prices than would be the case in a competitive market. 2. Inefficiency. Monopolists may not have the same incentives to innovate or lower costs as firms in competitive markets, leading to productive inefficiency. 3. Consumer harm. Consumers typically face higher prices and fewer choices when there is a monopoly, which leads to an overall loss of consumer welfare. 4. Deadweight loss. The monopoly's behavior leads to a loss of economic surplus, as the quantity produced is below the socially optimal level, resulting in deadweight loss to society. Thus, monopolies are a classic cause of market failure due to their negative impact on efficiency, competition, and consumer welfare. Analyzing the other options. Option A. Many firms. Having many firms in a market is typically a sign of perfect competition, which is usually efficient and does not lead to market failure. In a competitive market, firms produce at optimal output levels and prices reflect the true cost of production. So, the presence of many firms is not a cause of market failure. Next, option C, profit maximization, is a standard goal for firms in most market structures, including perfectly competitive markets. It does not, by itself, cause market failure. In a competitive market, firms are forced to maximize profits efficiently, which leads to the optimal allocation of resources. The problem arises when firms are able to exercise market power, e.g., in a monopoly or oligopoly, and restrict output or increase prices. Lastly, option D, specialization, refers to individuals, firms, or countries focusing on the production of goods in which they have a comparative advantage. This generally leads to greater efficiency and economic welfare. Specialization is not a cause of market failure, it is a key driver of economic growth and efficiency. In fact, specialization typically improves market outcomes and resource allocation. Moving to question number 15. In a private market system, certain goods and services would not be available unless the government intervened. What does this identify in a private market? A, market distribution. B, market equilibrium. C, market failure. D, market structure. Reference, 2019 October-November version 3. The correct answer for this question is option C, market failure. In a private market system, certain goods and services may not be provided at all or may be provided at suboptimal levels unless the government steps in. This is a classic example of market failure, which occurs when the free market fails to allocate resources efficiently or equitably. Some reasons for market failure include: 1. Public goods, goods that are non-rival. One person's use does not reduce availability for others, and non-excludable, people cannot be excluded from using the good, are often underprovided by the market. Examples include national defense or street lighting. 2. Externalities, when the production or consumption of a good has external costs, negative externalities like pollution, or external benefits, positive externalities like education, the market may fail to account for these and result in overproduction or underproduction. 3. Information asymmetry, when consumers or producers do not have complete or accurate information, it can lead to suboptimal decisions and inefficiency. 4. Monopoly power, a monopoly may restrict output and raise prices, reducing efficiency in the market. Government intervention, such as providing public goods, correcting externalities, or regulating monopolies, is often necessary to correct market failures and ensure the efficient and equitable allocation of resources. Analyzing the other options. Option A, market distribution, refers to the way goods and services are allocated or distributed among consumers in a market. This is not the cause of the absence of goods and services in a private market system, but rather describes how resources are divided among individuals. The absence of goods and services typically stems from market failure, not distribution issues. Next, option B, market equilibrium, occurs when the quantity supplied equals the quantity demanded at a given price. In a competitive market, equilibrium typically leads to an efficient allocation of resources. The lack of certain goods or services in a private market system, like public goods, reflects a market failure, not a disequilibrium. Lastly, option D, market structure, refers to the characteristics of a market, including the number of firms, the type of competition, and how goods and services are offered. While certain market structures, like monopolies, can lead to market failure, the reason for the absence of goods and services in a private market system is primarily due to market failure, not the structure itself. Moving to question number 16. What suggests that there is market failure? A, high producer profits. B, high retail prices. C, lack of competition. D, low levels of investment. Reference, 2019 October-November version 2. The correct answer for this question is option C, lack of competition. A lack of competition is a common sign of market failure. In a competitive market, firms must innovate and improve efficiency to attract customers, and prices typically reflect the true cost of production. However, when there is a lack of competition, such as in a monopoly or an oligopoly, firms can control prices, restrict output, and reduce innovation, leading to inefficient outcomes. This can result in higher prices than in a competitive market, lower quality goods or services, less choice for consumers, and reduced overall welfare. The absence of competition can lead to market power, where firms have the ability to manipulate prices and output in a way that does not reflect the optimal allocation of resources for society. In these cases, government intervention, e.g., antitrust laws or regulations, may be necessary to restore competition and improve market efficiency. Analyzing the other options. Option A, high producer profits, do not necessarily indicate market failure. Profit maximization is a normal outcome of competitive markets where firms successfully meet consumer demand. While excessive profits could indicate monopolistic behavior, high profits alone are not a clear sign of market failure, as they could also reflect high demand or innovation. Next, option B, high retail prices, can be a result of various factors, including high demand, low supply, or increased costs of production. While high prices could be a signal of inefficiency or market power, on their own they do not necessarily indicate market failure. For example, high prices in a competitive market can reflect the scarcity of goods, e.g., during a supply shock, which does not equate to market failure. Lastly, option D, low levels of investment, can be a sign of economic stagnation or uncertainty, but they are not directly linked to market failure. Investment can be low for reasons unrelated to market failure, such as poor economic conditions, uncertainty about future returns, or lack of access to capital. Market failure is more closely tied to inefficiency or inequitable outcomes, often linked to issues like externalities, public goods, or market power, rather than simply low investment levels. Moving to question number 17. In a city, what is most unlikely to be provided by the private market system? A museum. B, a school. C, a sports field. D, street lights. Reference, 2019 October-November version 1. The correct answer for this question is option D, street lights. Street lights are an example of a public good that is non-excludable and non-rival, which means that once they are provided, it is difficult or impossible to exclude people from using them, and one person's use of the street lights does not reduce their availability to others. Because of these characteristics, street lighting is likely to be underprovided by the private market. In a private market system, firms are generally motivated by profit, and since people cannot be excluded from using street lights, even those who do not pay for them, private companies have little incentive to provide them. As a result, governments typically step in to fund and manage public goods like street lights to ensure they are provided efficiently and equitably to all citizens. Analyzing the other options. Option A. A museum is typically a private or public service and may be provided by either the private or public sector. While many museums are funded by government grants or operated by non-profit organizations, private museums can exist as well, especially those that charge entrance fees. Therefore, a museum is more likely to be provided by the private market compared to public goods like street lights. Next, option B. A school can be either private or public, and many cities have both public and private schools. While the government provides public education, private schools can exist and are often an integral part of the market. Therefore, a school is likely to be provided in the private market system as well, especially in areas with private education options. Lastly, option C. A sports field can be built and operated by both the public and private sectors. Many private organizations, clubs, or schools build and maintain sports fields for recreational or competitive purposes. In some cases, public sports fields are provided as part of community services, but it is also common for private entities to manage sports facilities, especially for exclusive clubs or teams. Moving to question number 18. What causes market failure? A government provision of services. B, social costs equal private costs. C, the existence of external benefits. D, the existence of perfect competition. Reference, 2019 May-June version 1. The correct answer for this question is option C. The existence of external benefits. Market failure occurs when the allocation of resources by the market is inefficient, meaning that the market fails to produce the optimal outcome for society. This can happen in a variety of ways, one of which is the existence of external benefits, or positive externalities. An external benefit arises when the consumption or production of a good or service creates benefits for third parties who are not involved in the transaction. For example, when individuals get vaccinated, they not only protect their own health but also help reduce the spread of diseases, benefiting others in society. However, because individuals do not receive compensation for these external benefits, they may underconsume the good or service, leading to market failure. In the case of positive externalities, the market does not allocate enough resources to the production of the good or service, resulting in underproduction and underconsumption compared to the socially optimal level. Government intervention, e.g., subsidies or regulation, may be required to correct the market failure and ensure that the good is produced in sufficient quantities to maximize social welfare. Analyzing the other options. Option A, government provision of services, is a common response to market failure, not a cause of it. When the private market fails to provide essential goods or services, like public goods, healthcare, or education, the government may step in to supply them. Therefore, government provision is often the solution to, rather than the cause of, market failure. Next, option B, social costs equal private costs. This indicates that there are no externalities, neither negative nor positive, associated with production or consumption. In this situation, the market is functioning efficiently, and there is no market failure. Market failure typically occurs when there is a discrepancy between private costs and social costs, as in the case of negative externalities like pollution, or between private benefits and social benefits, as in the case of positive externalities. Lastly, option D. The existence of perfect competition is considered an ideal market structure where numerous firms compete, information is perfect, and resources are allocated efficiently. In this case, market failure does not occur, as perfect competition leads to allocative efficiency, where the price reflects the true cost of production and the optimal amount of goods and services are produced. Market failure usually arises when the market structure deviates from perfect competition, e.g., in the case of monopolies or imperfect competition. Moving to question number 19. An airline upgrades its services by providing bigger aircraft. The airline claims it will reduce catering waste and lower carbon, emissions per passenger journey, although fares may rise. What is a private cost and an external benefit of this decision? Reference, 2019 May-June version 2. The correct answer for this question is option B, higher fares, lower CO2. Private cost. The higher fares reflect an additional cost that the passengers pay to use the airline's upgraded service. This is a private cost because it directly affects the consumer, the airline passenger, who must pay higher prices for the service. External benefit. The lower CO2 emissions from the upgraded service represent a positive externality. External benefits occur when the society at large benefits from an action, even if the individual or firm that takes the action does not receive direct compensation for it. In this case, the airline's decision to use bigger, more efficient aircraft leads to lower carbon emissions per passenger journey, which benefits the environment and the broader public, even if passengers do not directly pay for this benefit. Moving to question number 20. China has built a new railway in Kenya from the capital, Nairobi, to the seaport of Mombasa. Kenya must repay the cost of the railway to China. Journey time has been reduced significantly, but fares have increased and farmers have lost agricultural land along the new line. Who bears the external costs of this operation? A. China, who built the new railway. B. Farmers who have lost agricultural land. C. Kenya, who must repay the cost to China. D. Passengers who pay the higher fare. Reference, 2019 May-June version 3. The correct answer for this question is option B, farmers who have lost agricultural land. The external costs of the new railway project are the negative effects that are not borne by the individuals or organizations directly involved in the transaction, i.e., those who do not pay or receive compensation. In this case, the farmers who have lost agricultural land are bearing an external cost because the construction of the railway line may have displaced them from their land, reducing their ability to farm and earn income. This loss of land is an uncompensated negative impact on the farmers, which is the essence of an external cost. External costs arise when the social costs to society as a whole, exceed the private costs incurred by the parties directly involved in the transaction, such as the construction of the railway. The farmer's land loss is an unintended consequence of the railway construction that is not reflected in the financial transactions between China and Kenya. Analyzing the other options. Option A: China who built the new railway. China is the builder and likely receives compensation for the construction work, and potentially profits from the loan agreement. Since the farmer's land loss is not something that China will compensate for, China does not bear the external cost. The external cost is borne by those who are negatively affected by the project without being compensated, which in this case are the farmers. Next, option C: Kenya who must repay the cost to China. While Kenya is responsible for repaying the cost of the railway, this represents a private cost to the government of Kenya, not an external cost. The repayment is an agreed financial obligation, not an unintended negative impact on third parties. The external cost involves harm that occurs outside of the transaction, which the government of Kenya does not directly bear in this case. Lastly, option D: Passengers who pay the higher fare, represents a private cost incurred by the individuals choosing to use the railway. It is a direct cost tied to the transaction between the railway company and the passenger. Higher fares may reduce the consumer surplus for passengers, but it is not an external cost, because passengers are fully aware of and willing to pay the higher price for the faster service. Moving to question number 21. Sometimes the government regulates the market to protect the interests of consumers. Which kind of regulation would achieve this protection? A: discouraging economies of scale that lead to lower costs. B: preventing mergers which result in high monopoly prices. C: reducing shop opening hours. D: reducing the range of products supplied to the market. Reference: 2019 May-June version 3. The correct answer for this question is option B: preventing mergers which result in high monopoly prices. Regulation that prevents mergers which result in monopoly power is a key tool to protect consumer interests. Monopolies or dominant firms with too much market power can raise prices above competitive levels, i.e., price gouging. Reduce product quality or innovation because they face little competition. Limit consumer choice by controlling the supply of products or services. By preventing such mergers, the government helps ensure that firms do not gain too much market control, keeping markets competitive, prices lower, and choices plentiful for consumers. This type of regulation protects consumers from the potential negative effects of monopolistic behavior, such as higher prices and reduced product variety. Analyzing the other options. Option A: discouraging economies of scale that lead to lower costs. Economies of scale refer to the cost advantages that firms experience as they increase in size and production. These cost reductions benefit consumers through lower prices. Discouraging economies of scale would typically result in higher costs and higher prices for consumers, which would not be in their best interest. Governments typically encourage economies of scale to improve efficiency and lower costs in the economy. Next, option C: reducing shop opening hours, would limit consumer choice and convenience, not protect consumer interests. In fact, more flexible hours typically benefit consumers by giving them more access to goods and services when they need them. Reducing hours could be detrimental to consumers, especially those with irregular schedules or those relying on extended shopping times. Lastly, option D: reducing the range of products supplied to the market, available to consumers would limit choice and competition, which generally harms consumers. A broader range of products allows consumers to choose the best products at competitive prices. Reducing product availability would hurt consumers by reducing their options. Moving to question number 22. A private sector firm is given a contract by the government to supply a country's water. Which government directive will minimize the risk of market failure? A: allow the firm to ration water rather than meet demand. B: ensure the firm's supply includes all areas which are expensive to service. C: insist that the firm aims to maximize profits. D: instruct the firm to provide water only to those who can pay for it. Reference, 2019 February-March version 2. The correct answer for this question is option B. Ensure the firm's supply includes all areas which are expensive to service. A key issue with the provision of essential services like water is that certain areas, especially remote or low-income areas, can be expensive to service, leading to market failure. In the absence of regulation, private firms may avoid providing services to these areas because they are not profitable or too costly to serve. This can result in some consumers being excluded from access to essential services. By ensuring the firm supplies all areas, including those that are expensive to serve, the government can prevent market failure by ensuring universal access to water, which is crucial for public health and well-being. This regulation helps to make sure that the private firm doesn't prioritize profits over social welfare, ensuring that even non-profitable areas still receive the necessary services. Analyzing the other options. Option A. Allow the firm to ration water rather than meet demand. Rationing water may lead to inefficiency and inequity, particularly if it means that some individuals or regions have limited access to a basic service like water. This would likely worsen market failure by exacerbating inequality and potentially leading to social unrest. The goal should be to meet demand, not limit access. Next, option C. Insist that the firm aims to maximize profits. While profit maximization is a natural goal for private firms, this approach can lead to market failure when firms prioritize profits over public welfare. In the case of water supply, a profit-maximizing firm might neglect to provide service to areas where it is not financially beneficial, such as remote or low-income areas. Ensuring universal access is a better regulatory approach. Lastly, option D. Instruct the firm to provide water only to those who can pay for it, creates a lack of access for those who cannot afford it, particularly in low-income areas. This would lead to inequity and market failure, as water is an essential service and everyone, regardless of income, should have access to it. Instructing the firm to limit service based on ability to pay would exacerbate social inequality and not address the need for universal access. Moving to question number 23. A major highway has been built at a cost of $175 million between Nairobi, Kenya, and its suburbs. This reduces travel time and increases safety, but there are environmental problems for small enterprises along its route. Who bears the external costs of this project? A. The authorities who paid for the highway. B. The commuters who travel to work in Nairobi. C. The construction companies that built the highway. D. The small enterprises along the route. Reference, 2018 October-November version 1. The correct answer for this question is option D. The small enterprises along the route. The external costs of this highway project are the negative impacts that affect individuals or groups who are not directly involved in the project, i.e., they do not receive compensation for these negative effects. In this case, the small enterprises along the highway route bear the external costs because they experience environmental problems such as disruption of their business operations, possible loss of customers or access to markets, deterioration in the local environment or conditions due to the construction or increased traffic. These costs are not compensated by the project stakeholders, like the government or construction companies, making them external to the decision-making process. The enterprises along the route suffer from these unintended negative consequences without any compensation, which is the essence of external costs. Analyzing the other options. Option A. The authorities who paid for the highway do not bear the external costs. The government is responsible for financing the construction, but the external costs are borne by those who are affected by the project, such as the small enterprises. The authorities may implement policies or provide compensation, but they are not the ones directly experiencing the negative effects of the highway. Next, option B. The commuters who travel to work in Nairobi. Commuters benefit from the highway because it reduces travel time and increases safety, so they do not bear the external costs. They are the direct beneficiaries of the highway and are not harmed by the environmental or business disruptions caused along the route. Lastly, option C. The construction companies that built the highway do not bear the external costs associated with the project. These companies are typically paid for their services and may not bear the social or environmental consequences once the project is completed. External costs, in this case, are the unintended negative effects on businesses and the environment, which fall outside of the contractor's responsibilities. Moving to question number 24. In the diagram, which level of subsidy per kilo would the government have to give to producers to encourage them to increase production from 20 kilograms per week to 30 kilograms per week? A. $3 per kilo. B. $5 per kilo. C. $8 per kilo. D. $15 per kilo. Reference, 2018 October, November version 1. The correct answer for this question is option C. The correct answer for this question is option C. Moving to question number 25. Coal production in the UK has declined in recent years. One reason given for this is that the social cost of coal production is too high. What best describes the social cost of coal production? Add all the benefits of coal production minus all the costs of coal production. B. The cost of the environmental damage caused by coal production. C. The cost to the government of subsidizing the coal industry. D. The private costs of coal production plus the external costs of coal production. Reference, 2018 October, November version 2. The correct answer for this question is option D. The private costs of coal production plus the external costs of coal production. The social cost of coal production includes both the private costs and the external costs associated with producing coal. Private costs are the costs borne by the coal producers themselves, e.g., labor, machinery, and equipment used to extract coal. External costs, also known as negative externalities, are the costs imposed on society that are not reflected in the price of coal, such as environmental damage, e.g., air pollution, land degradation, carbon emissions contributing to climate change. Health costs from pollution, e.g., respiratory diseases due to air pollution. Costs of cleaning up or mitigating environmental damage. When we talk about social costs, we're referring to the total cost to society of coal production, which is the sum of both the private and external costs. Since external costs are not typically considered by the coal producers, this is why market failure occurs, leading to overproduction of coal relative to the socially optimal level. Analyzing the other options. Option A. All the benefits of coal production minus all the costs of coal production, describes net benefits or economic surplus, not social cost. Social cost is about what society pays for coal production, not what it benefits from it. Social costs focus on the negative side, externalities, while benefits, such as energy production, jobs, etc., would fall under social benefits, not costs. Next, option B. The cost of the environmental damage caused by coal production. While environmental damage is a major component of the external costs of coal production, this option only focuses on one aspect. The social cost includes both environmental damage and other externalities like health costs, social costs of carbon emissions, etc., which are also important. Lastly, option C. The cost to the government of subsidizing the coal industry is related to public expenditure, not the social cost of production. Subsidies might reduce the private cost for producers, but they do not capture the full social cost, which includes the negative externalities of coal production. Moving to question number 26. A government approved the construction of a new railway line connecting major cities. It would be built by a private company but be funded partly through taxation. It would create many jobs. People living on the route worried about the harm to their environment. Which concepts are directly involved in this statement? A. Excess demand and public corporation. B. Government subsidies and perfect competition. C. Market system and income distribution. D. Private benefit and external cost. Reference, 2018 May-June version 1. The correct answer for this question is option D, private benefit and external cost. This scenario involves both private benefits and external costs, which are key concepts in economics related to market failure and the social impact of economic activities. Private benefit refers to the direct benefits that individuals or groups, in this case, the private company and those who benefit from the railway, gain from the project. This could include the profits for the private company building the railway, the jobs created during construction, and the enhanced transportation infrastructure that will benefit people who travel on the railway. External cost refers to the unintended negative impacts on people who are not directly involved in the transaction. Here, the people living along the route are worried about the environmental harm caused by the construction of the railway. These could include pollution, noise, destruction of local ecosystems, or other negative impacts that affect them but are not directly compensated for by the private company or the government. In this case, the private benefits, jobs, transportation improvements, are weighed against the external costs, environmental harm to those along the route, highlighting the concept of market failure, where the market does not take into account the broader social costs of a project. Analyzing the other options. Option A, excess demand and public corporation. Here, excess demand refers to situations where demand exceeds supply, which doesn't apply here since the concern is about environmental harm, not about an imbalance between supply and demand. A public corporation is a government-owned business, but this situation involves a private company building a project funded partly by taxes, not a government-run corporation. Next, option B, government subsidies and perfect competition. While government subsidies are mentioned, the funding of the railway partly through taxation, this option doesn't fully capture the core issue of the environmental harm, which is the external cost. Perfect competition is unrelated to this scenario, as we're dealing with a monopoly or a market with limited competition in the context of infrastructure projects like railways. Lastly, option C, market system and income distribution. While the market system is at play, since a private company is involved. This option focuses on how goods and services are allocated, and how income is distributed among different groups. The core issue here is not about income distribution, but about the social costs and benefits of the project, making private benefit and external cost the more relevant concepts. Moving to question number 27. The table shows government estimates of the private and external benefits and costs of building a new dam. What is the difference between the social benefits and social costs of building the dam? A. $25 million. B. $50 million. C. $175 million. D. $225 million. Reference, 2018 May-June version 2. The correct answer for this question is option D. Social benefits equals private benefits plus external benefits. Social benefits equals $250 million plus $325 million equals $575 million. Next. Social costs equals private costs plus external costs. Social costs equals $200 million plus $150 million equals $350 million. So, now. Difference equals social benefits, social costs. Difference equals $575 million to $350 million equals $225 million. Moving to question number 28. Which situation involving the building industry is most likely to be investigated by a government body set up to control restrictive practices? A. A builder purchasing a plot of land for development of housing. B. Groups of suppliers of building materials agreeing to fix prices. C. Several builders bidding for the same contracts. D. Several builders using different sources of supply. Reference, 2018 May-June version 2. The correct answer for this question is option B, groups of suppliers of building materials agreeing to fix prices. A government body set up to control restrictive practices, such as a competition authority or antitrust agency, typically investigates situations where there is evidence of anti-competitive behavior that restricts competition in the market. In this case, option B describes a situation where groups of suppliers of building materials agree to fix prices. Price-fixing agreements are a classic example of a restrictive practice. When firms agree to fix prices, it leads to higher prices for consumers and reduced competition, which is harmful to the efficiency of the market. Such practices are illegal in most countries because they distort market functioning and harm consumers by leading to prices that do not reflect competitive market forces. Analyzing the other options. Option A. A builder purchasing a plot of land for development of housing involves a normal business transaction and doesn't constitute a restrictive practice. There's nothing in this action that limits competition or harms market efficiency, so it would not typically be investigated by a government body controlling restrictive practices. Next are Option C. Several builders bidding for the same contracts. Competitive bidding is a normal and healthy market practice where multiple firms compete for contracts. This is an example of competition, not a restrictive practice. In fact, competitive bidding usually promotes lower prices and increased efficiency in the market. Lastly, Option D. Several builders using different sources of supply also describes normal market behavior, where different builders use different suppliers to source materials. This indicates competition and diversity in sourcing, which is healthy for the market and doesn't restrict competition. Moving to question number 29. A private firm is one of a few suppliers of electricity in an economy. It is fined by the government for pollution from its coal-fired power stations, which affect the health of those living nearby. What does this situation involve? A. A government policy of nationalizing an electricity supplier. B. A market structure for electricity that is perfect competition. C. A monopoly electricity supplier that ignores government controls. D. External costs that are the result of electricity production. Reference, 2018 May-June version 3. The correct answer for this question is option D. External costs that are the result of electricity production. This involves external costs, which are the negative side effects or spillover effects of electricity production that affect people outside of the firm's direct market transactions. In this case, the pollution caused by the coal-fired power stations leads to health problems for the local population, who are not compensated for these harms. These are external costs because they affect third parties, those living nearby, and are not accounted for in the cost of producing electricity, which is borne by the electricity company and its customers. External costs occur when the production or consumption of a good or service causes harmful side effects that affect third parties. In this case, the pollution caused by the coal-fired power stations is an example of negative externalities, as the health costs are borne by the local residents, not the power company or the consumers of electricity. Analyzing the other options. Option A. A government policy of nationalizing an electricity supplier. Nationalization refers to the process where the government takes control of a private industry. This scenario does not describe the government taking control of the electricity supplier, but rather fining the private firm for pollution. So, nationalization is not the correct concept here. Next, option B. A market structure for electricity that is perfect competition. In perfect competition, there are many suppliers offering identical products, and no single firm can influence the price. The situation described here is not one of perfect competition, as the firm is one of a few suppliers, likely indicative of an oligopoly, and it is dealing with the issue of pollution, which suggests it might have significant market power. So, this is not a case of perfect competition. Lastly, option C. A monopoly electricity supplier that ignores government controls. While the firm might be one of the few suppliers, the situation does not describe a monopoly, where there is only one supplier. Moving to question number 30. In many countries, the government provides financial help to firms who wish to produce electricity using wind turbines. Which kind of policy measure is this? A. Deregulation. B. Maximum price. C. Subsidy. D. Taxation. Reference, 2018 May-June version 3. The correct answer for this question is option C, subsidy. The financial help provided by the government to firms that wish to produce electricity using wind turbines is a subsidy. A subsidy is a financial aid or support provided by the government to encourage certain activities or behaviors that are considered beneficial for the economy or society. In this case, the government is providing financial assistance to promote the use of renewable energy sources like wind turbines, which are environmentally friendly and contribute to reducing reliance on fossil fuels. This policy is designed to lower the cost for firms producing electricity through wind power, making it more economically viable and competitive compared to traditional methods of electricity generation, like coal or natural gas. Subsidies help to incentivize production of renewable energy and increase supply of clean energy in the market. Analyzing the other options. Option A, deregulation, refers to the removal or reduction of government restrictions or controls in certain industries. It is the opposite of providing a subsidy or financial support. In this case, the government is not removing regulations, but rather providing financial incentives to support a specific industry, renewable energy. Next, option B, maximum price, is a price ceiling set by the government to prevent prices from rising above a certain level. This typically applies to goods and services that are considered necessities, e.g., rent control or price caps on essential goods, not to financial assistance for specific industries like wind energy. Lastly, option D, taxation, refers to the process of collecting taxes from individuals or firms by the government. While taxes can be used to discourage certain behaviors, e.g., carbon taxes on polluting firms, the government providing financial help for wind energy is the opposite of taxation. It is a form of financial support or incentive. Moving to question number 31. What is an external cost of mining coal? A. The cost of purchasing mining equipment. B. The extra cleaning costs of local residents' houses because of coal dust. C. The extra cleaning costs of the mine buildings because of coal dust. D. The cost to the mine owners to remove waste. Reference, 2018 February-March version 2. The correct answer for this question is option B. The extra cleaning costs of local residents' houses because of coal dust. An external cost, or negative externality, refers to a cost imposed on individuals or groups who are not directly involved in the economic transaction, but who suffer as a result of it. In this case, coal mining generates pollution in the form of coal dust, which can affect the environment and local residents. Here, option B correctly identifies the extra cleaning costs of local residents' houses as an external cost. These are costs that the residents must bear due to the pollution caused by the mining activities, but the mine owners are not directly responsible for these costs. This is a typical example of an external cost, as the harm, in this case, the need to clean coal dust from homes, is imposed on a third party, the residents, rather than the firm responsible for the coal mining. Analyzing the other options. Option A. The cost of purchasing mining equipment is a private cost incurred by the coal mining company itself. It's part of the firm's own costs of operation and does not represent an external cost because it directly affects the company, not society at large. Next, option C. The extra cleaning costs of the mine buildings because of coal dust are part of the private costs of running the mine. The cleaning costs for the mine buildings are incurred by the mine owners, so they are internal costs, not external costs. Lastly, option D. The cost to the mine owners to remove waste, similar to option A and C, this is also a private cost. The cost of removing waste from the mine is borne by the mine owners, not by society or external parties. External costs arise when individuals or groups not directly involved in the mining operation bear the burden of the negative effects. Moving to question number 32. A government believes that consumption of a certain good will be of benefit to society. Which policy is most likely to encourage producers to increase their output of that good? A. An increase in the period required for training the industry's workers. B. An increase in the regulations affecting businesses. C. An increase in the subsidies for that good. D. An increase in the taxation of that good. Reference, 2018 February-March version 2. The correct answer for this question is option C. An increase in the subsidies for that good. If the government believes that the consumption of a certain good will be of benefit to society, e.g., because it has positive externalities or contributes to societal well-being, it is likely to encourage producers to increase their output of that good. One effective way to do this is by offering subsidies. A subsidy is a form of financial assistance or support provided by the government to reduce the cost of production for firms. By increasing subsidies for a good, the government lowers the cost for producers, making it more profitable for them to increase production. This encourages producers to supply more of the good, which in turn helps achieve the government's goal of encouraging greater consumption for societal benefit. Analyzing the other options. Option A. An increase in the period required for training the industry's workers would likely reduce the speed at which new workers enter the industry, which could slow down production and possibly increase costs in the short term. This would not directly encourage producers to increase output of the good. Next, option B. An increase in the regulations affecting businesses. Increased regulations typically create additional costs and administrative burdens for businesses. This would likely discourage production or make it more expensive for firms to increase output, rather than encourage them to produce more. Increased regulations could raise barriers to entry or raise compliance costs, reducing the incentive to increase output. Lastly, option D. An increase in the taxation of that good, particularly if it is a sales tax or excise tax, would generally increase the price for consumers and reduce demand. This would not encourage producers to increase output. In fact, it would likely have the opposite effect by reducing the quantity demanded. Increased taxes on a good are usually intended to reduce consumption or production. Moving to question number 33. What might be an external cost of drinking alcohol? A. The cost of a bottle of wine. B. The risk of illness from drinking alcohol. C. The risk of street violence. D. The tax paid to the government. Reference, 2017 October, November version 3. The correct answer for this question is option C. The risk of street violence. An external cost, or negative externality, occurs when the actions of an individual or group impose costs on third parties who are not involved in the activity. In the case of drinking alcohol, there are various external costs that affect others who are not directly consuming the alcohol. Option C, the risk of street violence, is an example of an external cost because it involves the negative effects that alcohol consumption can have on others in society. For example, excessive drinking can contribute to aggressive behavior or violent incidents in public spaces, which puts the safety of other people at risk, even if they are not drinking themselves. These costs are external because they are not borne by the drinker directly, but instead by others who might become victims of violence or disturbances caused by drunken individuals. Analyzing the other options. Option A. The cost of a bottle of wine is a private cost incurred by the individual who chooses to buy and consume the alcohol. The cost is borne by the consumer and does not represent an externality, as it is part of the private transaction between the buyer and seller. Next, option B. The risk of illness from drinking alcohol is also a private cost to the drinker. If a person drinks alcohol, they may suffer from health issues such as liver disease or addiction. However, this is not an external cost because the health risk affects the drinker, not third parties. Lastly, option D. The tax paid to the government. The tax paid on alcohol is a government revenue that is part of the private cost of consuming alcohol. The tax might help address some of the negative externalities, e.g., through funding public health initiatives, but the tax itself is not an external cost, it is a policy tool used by the government. Moving to question number 34. A government needs to decide how much to fine firms for causing the external costs of air pollution in industrial areas. Which external cost would be the most difficult to measure in monetary terms? A. The discomfort associated with breathing. B. The expenditure on additional healthcare. C. The loss of earnings due to illness. D. The medical research into respiratory disease. Reference, 2017 October, November version 1. The correct answer for this question is option A. The discomfort associated with breathing. The external cost of air pollution includes the negative impacts that pollution has on individuals and society. While many of these costs can be measured in terms of direct financial losses, such as medical expenses or lost wages, some are much harder to quantify in monetary terms. Option A, the discomfort associated with breathing, is the most difficult external cost to measure in monetary terms because it involves subjective feelings of discomfort or pain that are difficult to quantify. People may experience varying levels of discomfort when exposed to poor air quality, and it can depend on personal health conditions, sensitivities, or even psychological factors. This makes it hard to assign a clear financial value to the discomfort caused by air pollution. Analyzing the other options. Option B. The expenditure on additional healthcare, due to pollution-related illnesses, is a direct cost that can be measured in monetary terms. Governments or healthcare providers can calculate the additional spending required to treat people suffering from diseases caused by air pollution, making this cost relatively easy to quantify. Next, option C. The loss of earnings due to illness is another direct and measurable external cost. If air pollution causes workers to become ill and miss work, the lost wages can be directly calculated based on the number of days missed and the average wage rate. This can be measured with some accuracy. Lastly, option D. The medical research into respiratory disease can also be measured in monetary terms. The costs involved in funding medical research, such as the salaries of researchers, lab equipment, and research grants, can be quantified directly. Moving to question number 35. What is an example of market failure? A city center congestion. B. Low economic growth. C. Rising prices. D. Trade deficits. Reference, 2017 October, November version 1. The correct answer for this question is option A, city center congestion. Market failure occurs when the allocation of goods and services by a free market is not efficient, meaning that resources are not distributed optimally to meet society's needs or well-being. City center congestion is a classic example of market failure because it arises when individual decisions, such as driving a car, lead to negative externalities that affect others in society, but the costs are not reflected in the prices or decisions of the drivers. In the case of city center congestion, too many people drive at the same time and place, which leads to overuse of a limited resource, the road network. The external costs of this congestion include time lost, increased pollution, and higher stress levels, but individual drivers do not bear these costs directly. As a result, the market fails to allocate road use efficiently, leading to overconsumption of road space. Government intervention, such as road pricing or investment in public transport, can help address this market failure. Analyzing the other options. Option B, low economic growth, can be a result of various factors, such as a lack of investment, reduced consumer demand, or external shocks. While low economic growth can indicate inefficiencies in the economy, it is not necessarily an example of market failure. Market failure specifically refers to situations where markets do not allocate resources efficiently, whereas low growth is a broader economic issue that may or may not involve market failure. Next, option C, rising prices, are a normal market phenomenon that can occur due to changes in demand or supply. For example, prices may rise because of inflation, shifts in consumer preferences, or supply chain disruptions. Rising prices by themselves do not constitute market failure unless they result in situations like monopolistic pricing, where a single firm has market power and can set prices unfairly, or price gouging in emergencies. Lastly, option D, trade deficits, occurs when a country imports more goods and services than it exports. While this may have economic implications, such as affecting the balance of payments or causing long-term debt issues, a trade deficit is not an example of market failure. It may reflect differences in domestic savings and investment or exchange rate issues, but it is not inherently an inefficiency in the market allocation of resources. Moving to question number 36. A government allowed a building company to construct new houses, which destroyed an area designated as an area of natural beauty. Which concepts can be applied to this statement? A budget surplus, public sector. B. External cost, opportunity cost. C. Government subsidy, mixed economy. D. Private enterprise, budget deficit. Reference, 2017 October, November version 2. The correct answer for this question is option B, external cost, opportunity cost. This describes a situation where a government permits a building company to construct new houses, but the construction leads to the destruction of an area of natural beauty. The most relevant concepts to apply here are external cost and opportunity cost. External cost. This refers to the negative side effects of an economic activity that are not reflected in the price of the good or service and are imposed on third parties. In this case, the destruction of an area of natural beauty is an external cost because it affects the environment and society as a whole, but the building company and its consumers do not bear the full costs of this destruction. Opportunity cost. The decision to allow the construction of houses means the government and society have to forego the benefits of preserving the area of natural beauty. The opportunity cost is the value of what could have been gained from keeping the area intact, such as tourism, conservation, and ecological benefits. Analyzing the other options. Option A, budget surplus, public sector. A budget surplus refers to a situation where the government's revenue exceeds its expenditure. Public sector refers to the part of the economy that is controlled by the government. Neither of these concepts directly relates to the destruction of a natural area by a building company. The focus in the statement is on the environmental and economic implications of the construction decision, not on government budget issues. Next, option C, government subsidy, mixed economy. A government subsidy is financial assistance given by the government to support a particular industry or activity, often to encourage production or consumption. A mixed economy is an economic system that blends elements of both private enterprise and government intervention. While the government might be involved in this decision, the statement does not describe the government subsidizing the construction or acting within a mixed economy context. The key issues here are external costs and opportunity costs, not subsidies or economic systems. Lastly, option D, private enterprise, budget deficit. Private enterprise refers to businesses that are privately owned and operated. A budget deficit occurs when a government's expenditures exceed its revenues. While the building company is involved in the construction, which is a private enterprise, the issue is not about the government's budget but rather about the externalities caused by the construction. The most relevant concepts are the environmental costs and the opportunity cost of losing the natural area. Moving to question number 37. Which of the effects of economic development is an external cost? A, higher employment. B, higher fixed costs. C, increased production. D, increased traffic congestion. Reference, 2017 October, November version 2. The correct answer for this question is option D, increased traffic congestion. An external cost, also known as a negative externality, occurs when the actions of individuals or businesses result in costs that are not borne by the individuals or businesses involved, but by third parties or society as a whole. Increased traffic congestion is a classic example of an external cost that arises from economic development or increased production. As a city or region develops economically, more businesses open, more people move to the area, and more people own cars. This leads to increased traffic congestion on the roads. The external costs of this congestion include increased pollution from more vehicles, time wasted in traffic, which could have been spent more productively, higher stress levels for commuters, increased accidents and related social costs. These costs are not reflected in the price of using the roads, and they affect individuals who are not involved in the decision-making, e.g., people who are not driving but are impacted by the congestion. Analyzing the other options. Option A, higher employment, is generally considered a benefit of economic development, not an external cost. More jobs can lead to higher incomes, better living standards, and other positive economic outcomes. Employment, in itself, does not impose costs on others, rather, it is typically a positive effect. Next, option B, higher fixed costs, refer to the costs that businesses incur regardless of the level of output, such as rent, salaries, and insurance. While this can be a challenge for businesses, it is a private cost to the company and does not constitute an external cost because the business itself bears these costs. It does not directly affect society outside the company. Lastly, option C, increased production, refers to the growth in the output of goods and services. While higher production can lead to greater economic growth and employment, it can also contribute to external costs, such as pollution. However, increased production by itself is not an external cost. The external costs arise from the consequences of that production, such as pollution or resource depletion. Moving to question number 38. A beekeeper maintains hives of bees to produce honey. The bees can pollinate neighbors' fruit trees but also give a painful sting to gardeners. If both of these events occur, how will costs and benefits be affected? A. External benefits will fall and social costs will fall. B. External costs will rise and social benefits will fall. C. Social costs and social benefits will fall. D. Social costs and social benefits will rise. Reference, 2017 May-June version 2. The correct answer for this question is option D. Social costs and social benefits will rise. This involves both positive externalities, the benefits of pollination, and negative externalities, the pain from bee stings. To understand how costs and benefits are affected, let's break it down. External benefits, positive externality, the bees help pollinate the fruit trees of the neighbors. This is a positive externality because the beekeeper is not directly compensated for the benefits that the bees provide to others by improving crop yields. These benefits are social benefits that increase due to the bees' pollination services. External costs, negative externality on the flip side, the bees might sting gardeners or people nearby, causing pain and possibly injury. This is a negative externality, as the beekeeper does not bear the full cost of these stings. The affected individuals bear the costs of pain and potential medical expenses. Given that both external costs, stings, and external benefits, pollination, are present, the total social costs and social benefits will both be affected. Social benefits will rise, because the positive impact of pollination on the fruit trees will benefit the broader community. Social costs will rise, because the pain caused by bee stings will affect the people around the hives. Thus, both the social benefits from pollination and social costs from bee stings increase, leading to a rise in both. Analyzing the other options. Option A, external benefits will fall and social costs will fall. This is incorrect because external benefits, pollination, will not fall. In fact, they will rise as the bees pollinate the fruit trees. Social costs might rise from stings, not fall. Next, option B, external costs will rise and social benefits will fall. This is incorrect because social benefits from pollination will not fall. They are likely to increase as the bees pollinate more fruit trees. External costs from stings will rise, but the benefits do not fall. Lastly, option C, social costs and social benefits will fall. This is incorrect because the actions of the bees, pollination and stinging, would increase both the social benefits, more fruit trees being pollinated, and the social costs, more people being stung, rather than causing them to fall. Moving to question number 39. A project to build one of the world's biggest coal mines was planned in Australia. The project was estimated to cost $12.5 million. It would create employment but threaten endangered species as large coal ships would damage the Great Barrier Reef. What effects would this project have on the following costs and benefits? Reference, 2017 May-June version 1. The correct answer for this question is option C. Moving to question number 40. What is an example of market failure? A. A growth of competition. B. A spread of pollution. C. A surplus of production in the short term. D. An existence of scarcity. Reference, 2017 February-March version 2. The correct answer for this question is option B. A spread of pollution. Market failure occurs when the allocation of resources by a free market is inefficient, often leading to outcomes that do not maximize social welfare. It typically happens when there are externalities, which are costs or benefits that affect third parties who are not involved in the transaction. Pollution is a negative externality, where the costs of pollution, such as harm to health, the environment, or property, are not reflected in the price of the good or service being produced. For example, factories that pollute the air or water impose costs on society, healthcare costs, environmental cleanup, that they don't have to pay. This is a clear example of market failure, because the market does not account for these external costs. Analyzing the other options. Option A. A growth of competition typically leads to more efficient markets and better outcomes for consumers, e.g., lower prices, higher quality, so it is not an example of market failure. Increased competition tends to improve market performance rather than cause inefficiency or failure. Next, option C. A surplus of production in the short term can be a temporary issue where supply exceeds demand, but this does not necessarily indicate market failure. It can be a short-term adjustment issue that may resolve through price mechanisms or other market forces. This might lead to price adjustments, but does not represent a failure to allocate resources efficiently in the long run. Lastly, option D. An existence of scarcity refers to the fundamental economic problem that resources are limited, but it is not itself an example of market failure. Scarcity is a basic condition in all economies and is addressed through market mechanisms, such as price signals, supply and demand. It does not represent an inefficient allocation of resources, which is central to market failure. Moving to question number 41. What indicates the existence of external costs in an economy? A. An international trade deficit has caused the country to be in debt. B. National companies have borrowed from foreign investors. C. Private costs of production are less than social costs. D. Private costs of production are more than social benefits. Reference, 2016 October-November version 2. The correct answer for this question is option C. Private costs of production are less than social costs. External costs, or negative externalities, occur when the private costs of producing a good or service do not reflect the true social costs. In other words, the costs imposed on society are not fully borne by the producer or consumer involved in the transaction. This mismatch leads to market failure because the price mechanism doesn't account for the broader negative impacts on others, such as pollution, health problems, or environmental degradation. Option C is the correct answer because it describes the situation where the private costs of production, what the producer incurs directly, are less than the social costs, which include the private costs plus the external costs imposed on society, like pollution, health costs, etc. This indicates the presence of external costs, because the true cost of production is higher than what the producer is paying, leading to inefficiency in the market. Analyzing the other options. Option A. An international trade deficit has caused the country to be in debt. An international trade deficit, where imports exceed exports, and national debt are economic issues, but they are not directly related to external costs. A trade deficit does not necessarily indicate the presence of externalities, it is more about a country's balance of payments and its financial position in international trade. Next, option B. National companies have borrowed from foreign investors. Borrowing from foreign investors is related to financial transactions and capital flows, not the presence of external costs. External costs are concerned with the broader impact of economic activities on society, particularly when costs are not reflected in the price of goods and services. Lastly, option D. Private costs of production are more than social benefits, is a bit misleading, as it suggests a misalignment between costs and benefits, but does not directly address external costs. External costs specifically refer to situations where the private costs of production do not reflect the total, social, costs, including the costs imposed on others. The correct issue here is that private costs are less than social, not the comparison of private costs to social benefits. Moving to question number 42. The use of cars in many cities creates negative externalities. The diagram shows the free market equilibrium x1 and the socially efficient market equilibrium x2. Using the diagram, which statement is correct? A socially efficient supply is S1 and the market price P1 is too high. B. Socially efficient supply is S1 and the market price P1 is too low. C. Socially efficient supply is S2 and the market price P1 is too high. D. Socially efficient supply is S2 and the market price P1 is too low. Reference, 2016 October, November version 3. The correct answer for this question is option D. Moving to question number 43. Which type of government policy would be most suitable to control external costs of production? A. Employment policy. B. Fiscal policy. C. Monetary policy. D. Trade policy. Reference, 2016 May-June version 3. The correct answer for this question is option B. Fiscal policy involves government actions related to taxing and spending. It is the most suitable tool for addressing external costs, or negative externalities, because the government can use taxes or subsidies to influence the behavior of producers and consumers in ways that correct market failures caused by externalities. In the case of external costs, like pollution from production, the government can impose taxes on the activity causing the negative externality. This is known as a Pigovian tax, where the tax is set equal to the estimated cost of the externality. For example, a tax on carbon emissions would help make the producer internalize the environmental costs of pollution, leading them to reduce harmful production practices. Alternatively, the government could provide subsidies to encourage more environmentally friendly production methods that do not create negative externalities. Analyzing the other options. Option A, employment policy, is focused on labor market issues, such as reducing unemployment, increasing job opportunities, or improving labor market conditions. While it can have indirect effects on economic welfare, it is not the primary tool for controlling external costs related to production. Next, option C, monetary policy, involves managing interest rates and the money supply to control inflation, stabilize the economy, and influence employment levels. While it can affect overall economic activity, monetary policy is not directly aimed at controlling external costs from production. It does not address market failures caused by externalities in a targeted way. Lastly, option D, trade policy, relates to managing international trade, including tariffs, quotas, and trade agreements. While trade policy can influence the economy by affecting imports and exports, it is not the primary tool for addressing external costs in domestic production. External costs, like pollution, require interventions like taxes or regulation, not trade restrictions. Moving to question number 44. Developers want to increase the size of a major retail shopping area in a city. It is thought that the proposal would create hundreds of jobs, be profitable for the shops, but cause major traffic congestion. What economic concepts are directly involved in this statement? A. External cost and private benefit. B. Income distribution and inelastic demand. C. Private investment and a decrease in supply. D. Social benefit and perfect competition. Reference, 2016 May-June version 1. The correct answer for this question is option A, external cost and private benefit. In this scenario, the key economic concepts involved are external costs and private benefits, which are both commonly discussed when evaluating the effects of an economic decision or project like the proposed shopping area expansion. External cost, the traffic congestion caused by the development, is an example of an external cost, also known as a negative externality. These are costs that are not borne by the developer or the businesses directly involved in the project, but rather by third parties or society as a whole, e.g., commuters and local residents who experience the congestion. The external cost here is the increased travel time, pollution, and other negative impacts on the broader community. Private benefit, the private benefits refer to the gains that directly accrue to the developers, businesses, and perhaps some workers from the project. These benefits might include the creation of hundreds of jobs and the profitability of the shops that would benefit from increased consumer traffic. Thus, external cost, traffic congestion, and private benefit, jobs and profitability for the shops, are the main economic concepts at play. Analyzing the other options. Option B, income distribution and inelastic demand. Income distribution refers to how income is divided among different groups in society, and inelastic demand refers to a situation where the quantity demanded of a good does not change much in response to a change in price. Neither of these concepts directly addresses the issue of external costs, traffic congestion, or private benefits, jobs and profits, in the context of the shopping area expansion. Next, option C, private investment and a decrease in supply. Private investment refers to the expenditure of private funds in an economic activity, such as the investment made by developers in this case. However, the statement does not involve a decrease in supply. In fact, the proposal is likely to increase supply of retail space, not decrease it. This option does not directly address the conflict between external costs and private benefits. Lastly, option D, social benefit and perfect competition. Social benefit typically refers to the total benefit to society from an activity, including both private benefits and external benefits. Perfect competition refers to a market structure where many firms sell identical products and no single firm can influence the market price. While there may be a social benefit, like job creation, in this case, perfect competition is not relevant here since the development is likely to lead to an imperfect market structure, with fewer large firms dominating retail spaces, and the focus is on external costs, congestion, and private benefits, profits, jobs. Moving to question number 45. How are social costs calculated? A. Fixed costs plus variable costs. B. Private benefits less private costs. C. Private costs plus external costs. D. Social benefits less external costs. Reference, 2016 February-March version 2. The correct answer for this question is option C, private costs plus external costs. Social costs refer to the total cost to society of producing a good or service. It includes both the private costs, the costs borne by the producers or consumers directly involved in the transaction, and the external costs, the costs imposed on third parties who are not part of the transaction, such as environmental damage, health effects, etc. So, social costs are calculated as private costs. These are the costs incurred by the producers and consumers directly involved in the transaction, e.g., the cost of labor, raw materials, etc. External costs. These are the costs that are not reflected in the price of the good or service but affect others in society, e.g., pollution, noise, or traffic congestion caused by production. The formula for social costs is social costs equals private costs plus external costs. Moving to question number 46. A developer built some large houses in a rural area which poorer people could not afford. The houses destroyed an area of natural beauty. What type of market failure resulted from the development? A. Ignoring external cost. B. Inequality of income. C. Lack of information. D. Price discrimination. Reference, 2015 October-November version 1. The correct answer for this question is option A, ignoring external cost. This involves a market failure where the negative consequences of the development, the destruction of an area of natural beauty, are not accounted for in the decision-making process of the developer. The external cost refers to the environmental harm caused by the destruction of the natural beauty, which is an impact on society that the developer does not bear. The developer does not have to pay for the environmental damage. This is a classic example of market failure, because the market is not accounting for the external costs of the development, which leads to inefficiency. The market is failing to allocate resources in a way that maximizes social welfare, as the broader social costs, environmental damage, are not reflected in the price of the houses or the developer's costs. Analyzing the other options. Option B, inequality of income. While the fact that the houses are unaffordable for poorer people could reflect income inequality, the market failure described here is more about the external costs of the development, not the distribution of income. Inequality of income is a separate issue related to income distribution, which is a concern, but not the primary market failure in this case. Next, option C, lack of information, refers to a situation where consumers or producers do not have all the necessary information to make efficient choices, e.g., not knowing the true quality of a product. In this case, the issue is not about information but about the external costs, environmental damage, being ignored, so this is not the correct answer. Lastly, option D, price discrimination, occurs when a producer charges different prices for the same product or service to different consumers, based on factors such as willingness to pay. There is no mention of the developer charging different prices to different groups of consumers based on their ability to pay, so this is not relevant in this context. Moving to question number 47. What is an example of a public good? A. A theater performance. B. An injection to prevent influenza. C. Road signs and road markings. D. The collection of rubbish by a local authority. Reference, 2015 October, November version 3. The correct answer for this question is option C, road signs and road markings. A public good is defined by two main characteristics. 1. Non-excludability, people cannot be excluded from using the good, even if they don't pay for it. 2. Non-rivalrous consumption, one person's use of the good does not reduce its availability for others. Now, road signs and road markings are public goods because they are non-excludable, everyone can benefit from them without being excluded, regardless of whether they pay for them, and non-rivalrous, one person benefiting from road signs or markings does not prevent another person from benefiting from them as well. Analyzing the other options. Option A. A theater performance is excludable, you must buy a ticket to access it, and rivalrous, if one person is sitting in a seat, it is not available for someone else. Therefore, it is a private good, not a public good. Next, option B. An injection to prevent influenza, like the flu vaccine, is excludable, only those who pay or receive it have access to it, and rivalrous, a limited number of vaccines are available. It is also a merit good but not a public good because it does not meet the non-excludability or non-rivalrous criteria. Lastly, option D. The collection of rubbish by a local authority. While rubbish collection can be non-excludable, people can benefit even if they do not pay directly for it. It is typically rivalrous because the capacity of the rubbish collection service is limited, e.g., if one person's rubbish is picked up, that might reduce the service available to others. This makes rubbish collection a common good or club good, not a pure public good. Moving to question number 48. A large supermarket applied to build on land which was in an area of natural beauty. The local government allowed the building, even though the natural beauty of the area would be lost, because many jobs would be created and much-needed income would be brought to the local community. Which economic ideas cannot be found in the above statement? A. External cost and private enterprise. B. Free market and the conservation of resources. C. Opportunity cost and improved standards of living. D. Public sector and external benefit. Reference, 2015 May-June version 1. The correct answer for this question is option B. Free market and the conservation of resources is the correct answer because the statement does not fully reflect a free market decision, due to government intervention, and does not focus on conservation of resources, it focuses on the economic benefits of the development. Moving to question number 49. The table shows the harmful carbon dioxide emissions for a country in selected years in millions of tons. What would be likely to have the greatest effect on reducing carbon dioxide emissions? A. Introducing incentives to encourage manufacturers to reduce their emissions. B. Providing grants to fit solar panels to manufacturing premises. C. Raising taxes on petroleum and diesel fuel. D. Subsidizing car manufacturers. Reference, 2015 May-June version 3. The correct answer for this question is option C. Raising taxes on petroleum and diesel fuel would increase the cost of using fossil fuels, which are a major source of carbon dioxide emissions. By making fossil fuels more expensive, this would directly discourage consumption of these fuels and encourage a shift towards cleaner alternatives, e.g., electric cars, renewable energy. It would also encourage manufacturers to adopt greener technologies to reduce reliance on fossil fuels, creating a widespread impact across industries and households. This policy would likely have the greatest immediate and broad-based effect on reducing carbon dioxide emissions. Moving to question number 50. Although some economists believe that resources should be allocated through market forces, markets often fail. What might be an example of market failure? A. Access to subsidized healthcare. B. Monopoly pricing of electricity supplies. C. Prohibiting cigarette smoking in public places. Deregulation of interest rates charged by banks. Reference, 2015 February-March version 2. The correct answer for this question is option B, monopoly pricing of electricity supplies, because monopoly pricing results in market failure by distorting prices, reducing output, and leading to inefficient resource allocation.